huge.
Okay, that was the 1491s doing I'm an Indian Too. They are a very talented comic group. A lot of their stuff is on YouTube. Check them out. They do have t-shirts for sale to help fund their activities. So the information is in the description of tonight's broadcast. So check them out. I'm Patrick. This is Native Life, and tonight we're going to be talking about cultural appropriation, which is a big topic and kind of confusing sometimes. And we're going to have a special guest tonight, Johnnie Jae, and Eniko, I believe you have some things.
Yep, I have a Oak Flat segment, episode 3 to show today with our gentleman occupier at Oak Flat, Noel Benoist.
Awesome. Well, our guest tonight, Johnnie Jae, is the founder of a tribe called Geek, co-host of a tribe called Geek Radio Show, manager and producer for Success Native Style Radio Network, also the managing partner for Native Max magazine and contributing writer to Native News Online, and founding board member of Not Your Mascots. So welcome, Johnnie.
Welcome.
Hello.
Hi. So we're gonna kind of talk about cultural appropriation, and I think my first question is, what is it?
Well, it's cultural appropriation is very tricky. But more or less, the way that we view cultural appropriation is basically taking cultural items and using them in a way that is not respectful and not in line with the way that they were. It's basically a form of theft.
Okay, so there's a law that covers this, right?
Yes,
John,
there's the
slide one.
yes, there's actually the Native Indian Arts and Crafts Act of 1990, and it was put in place because of the widespread use of people selling native arts and crafts and saying that they were native made when they weren't. And putting this law in place is a way to protect like native artisans and native designers because cultural appropriation, a lot of people don't think that there is a negative impact, but there is, not just on the way that natives are viewed as people, but also on our native artisans, our designers, and it plays a huge part on our tribal economies as well as many of our natives. They do tend to make their living selling native arts and crafts.
Right. I was reading a little bit about the law because, while I'm aware it exists, I never really read it. And I was amazed to find out that it was originally passed in 1935, and that the current law we have was amended in 1990. And the original law just said it was illegal to market an art or craft using the name of a tribe. But the 1990 also said that it didn't matter that if you were a tribal member, if you said that you were making Cherokee artifacts and you were, say, Oglala, that also fell under the law, and I found that to be very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really glad that they went back and amended this to be cover more broader range of offenses. Like right now, I know that we've had two people that are recently being charged with violating the Indian Arts and Crafts Act. Both were saying that their arts were created by natives and claiming to be native when they weren't actually native. So this is something that is taken seriously, and I'm glad that it is because there's so many people that and I know that Native American art, we love Native American art. We love Native American themed crafts. And, a lot of people tend to say that, oh, this is a way to pay homage to Native Americans. But there is a downside to that, and a lot of that comes through the impact that it has on taking away jobs, taking away opportunities from our native artisans, and it does impact our tribal economies as well. So I'm really glad that this law did amend to cover that broader range to further protect Native people.
So, John, slide two. As consumers, one of the things that we can do then to help support Native folks is to not buy things that are disrespectful or that cross the line. And slide two here shows two very, they're the same cloth, the same fabric. I went out and found these online. The first one is labeled, if you can read the little teeny tiny print there, it says Navajo Indian, Native American, red and turquoise Indian print and pill fleece fabric. Okay. The second one, the one on the right hand side, or at least my right, says not appropriation at the top, and it just calls itself Cody Copper. Same fabric, two different names. The first one is offensive because that's not Navajo. That's not a Navajo design. And to muck about with what belongs with one tribe and another tribe fuzzes out our identity. The other one, the Cody Copper one, is fine. It's a geometric print, and that's perfectly good. And so don't buy the stuff that says Navajo whatever unless you're buying it from a Navajo artist.
Makes sense.
Absolutely. And that, yeah, it really does. And that's the thing too. A lot of people see like the geometric prints in stores. Those don't really bother me as much, as long as there's not a specific tribal name attached to them. And if that design isn't something that is identifiably from a specific tribe, with geometric prints, we could pretty much have free range, and a lot of different cultures use geometric prints in their design, so it's not necessarily something that can be portrayed as native, although it does look maybe southwestern. But for me, I think when you're looking at cultural appropriation, I think it's really important to be mindful of what it is you're buying and what it is you're buying into, because natives, we're not just one monolithic group. We are actually 566 sovereign nations, and there are hundreds more that aren't recognized by the government. And so a lot of these designs and a lot of the ways that we are portrayed in Native culture is portrayed through design and just within mainstream culture in general, tries to paint this monolithic picture of Native Americans when we are very diverse and we all have, very diverse designs. So it's really important, like when you're buying geometric designs, if it says a specific tribal name, like if it's Navajo or if it's Hopi, I would stay clear, just because it's misrepresenting those tribes. Now, if it's just like a geometric print and it just says something like Southwestern or, even just a tribal print, like I don't really see a problem with that as much as I do as when they try to attach a specific tribal name to it.
Right. And Eniko, did you have a question from the audience, or I thought I heard you say something?
No, I was just actually thinking because in Noel's interview, he mentions the fact that there are so many separate tribes, but that some people are trying to get them to get unified into this one, as she said, a monolithic identity. So that was an interesting contrast to what Noel was saying, and they both make sense actually.
Yeah, and it is important as Native people to unify, to come together on a lot of the issues and work together. But in creating unity, creating solidarity with each other's tribe, that doesn't necessarily mean that we have to give up our individual identities as sovereign nations.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think what he was saying matched that viewpoint. He was talking in the perspective of the government and treaties and things like that. So you'll hear when he talks about it, it's kind of a different context than what you're talking about as far as designs. He was talking about more of a governmental type of thing. So.
Yeah, and I'll just put this out there because, Native fashion right now is so amazing. There are some amazing Native designers who are literally taking the fashion world by storm right now. They've been showing in fashion weeks in New York. They've also been going global. A few of our designers have recently showed in New Zealand, and we've had designers showing their work in Paris. And so, Native fashion designers are just doing amazing work. So I think it's really important that we support them and support their art because they are giving a more authentic view and perspective of what it is to have Native style. And, just to throw a couple of names out there, Bethany Yellowtail, there's Orlando DeGuy, there's Alano Edzerza, and I know I just butchered his name and I'm sorry for that. But, there's also JG Indy. We have Helen Oro. We have so many fashion designers right now, and they have some beautiful, beautiful work. And so, like when I think of cultural appropriation, I'm thinking why? When you can go to the source and get something that is totally unique and totally representative of who Native people are now as modern and contemporary people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that kind of leads into, John, we're going to skip a couple slides and go to slide 5. Just to be difficult. I found this out. Johnnie gave me the clue to go look for it, and I found a clip of a group, but you mentioned Bethany Yellowtail as a designer, and it just kind of naturally flows in here. And John, we'll just keep talking over this. The clip is of KTZ, and they are currently in a fight, or actually Bethany Yellowtail is currently in a fight with them because their 2015 line is ripped off some of her designs. They've also used some family designs in there that should not be being used. They're like that one there. That was one I picked out that I noticed that I recognize that um, from the Seneca. There's another couple of ones in here coming up real quick. I mean, some of this is just strange, but that's a Thunderbird design, and that should not be being used. There's another one coming up here that's pretty weird, where I think it's the next one coming up. Yeah, that one there. That's the four sacred mountain design of the Navajo. Um, wrong thing to use. I mean, the clothes to me look odd anyway. But there's another Thunderbird. Um, these things are being used totally inappropriately. It's like having a cross that's upside down in a church and saying it's right. There's one that looks, has got all kinds of different designs on it that it shouldn't have. They've got the one Pocahontas black feather in the leather caps too, which kind of cracked me up. But I mean, if white people want to be weird and wear what looks like faux breastplates on their clothes, or the last one in this thing shows them where that's one where the purse is hanging down like a breech clout, and no woman would ever wear a breech clout. It just looks funny to my eyes.
Yeah, I mean, and it's really funny. I know that these, like right now, native fashion, there's been so many articles that have come out, and they're talking about how to go native, and that's not appropriate to say in the first place, but native designs, native prints are really in for this fall season, and there's a right way to pay homage to Native Americans, and with this, boy, why do they always have to go to the stereotypes? I mean, we have so many different artists who are incredible, and they can offer this unique perspective. So I don't know why more fashion houses aren't reaching out to our native designers and giving them the opportunity to bring their perspectives to their designs, or actually to their design houses. I believe it was Christy Belcourt. And I want to say it was Valentino who reached out to her, and I could be wrong on that, but she is a Métis fashion designer, and she did an incredible line for them. And, that is the way to do native fashion. That is the way that some of these fashion houses could really pay homage to native designs. This is how they can up their game.
Right. So now we're going to look at KTZ ripping off Bethany Yellowtail with one of her designs here in slide 6. And if you look at the patterns, all they've done is change the colors. The rest of it, they made the neck a little higher and the arms a little longer, but it's basically the same, to my eyes, the same pattern. And so why did, hers came out in 2014 and they stole it in 2015?
Absolutely, and she's not the only one. They've actually done the same thing to Jamie Okuma, who does incredible beadwork, but they've also ripped off some of her designs, and it's just crazy, and it's a form of erasure, really. Native Americans are starting to be more prominent within the mainstream, especially within the fashion industry, and so in a lot of ways, sometimes I feel like it's a way for them to like they feel like they're losing ground, like they're losing power, and so this is a way that they can try and get it back. by
Right,
stealing native
and
designs and passing it off as their own.
right, and then of course we get into the far end of the spectrum. And John, if we could go to slide 3, we're looking at the negative native stereotypes, and that's where people are. Uh, and since Halloween is coming up, it's kind of appropriate and easy to find examples of people dressing up as a race. And now I would think in this day and age that you're not supposed to cartoon a race, and to me it looks like mockery, that someone's just poking fun at and making a not fun. It's not funny. It's a mockery of a culture by coming up with these stereotype costumes. I mean, be a vampire, be a witch, be something, but be a Pokemon character. But why do you need to perpetuate the stereotype that these costumes represent?
Absolutely.
If we
And
could go to slide 2, it's more of the same, Johnny.
yeah, and I mean, to me, when I
Or
see these
slide 4.
costumes, I don't think people realize the impact that this has for our Native communities. For them, they see just a costume. Oh, we're just having fun. We're paying homage to Native Americans. But what they don't see is the impact that it has on our youth in the way that they view themselves as Native people. And, I mean, to me, I think in the ideal world, we could pay homage to each other by, dressing up as each other's cultures. But the problem is that we don't have the historical context to understand what it is we're doing, and we don't understand how these stereotypes came into being. Um, and we just don't understand each other enough as people and as Native Americans, as Irish, as the Scottish, and all these different cultures that we have around the world. We do not understand each other enough to try and be like, okay, I'm going to pay homage to you by dressing up like you, because especially with Native American stereotypes, and this is what I really hate as a Native woman, is that my identity as a Native woman, my femininity, my sexuality has been exploited to the point of oppression. And that's all through these stereotypes that are perpetrated through these Halloween costumes. You have the Pocahontas, and actually there was one I saw yesterday at, I believe it was Wally's Party Factory, and I was looking at Halloween costumes, and I was just getting ready to say, oh my God, this is awesome, no Native Halloween costumes. But then I turned the corner, and then I see Chief Winsome Tail, and one of my cousins actually pointed out to me, on the age limit it says 14 and up, for the costume age. And then you see the Pocahontas costume that is a totally sexualized version of what Native women should be. And again, it says 14 age and up, which is totally inappropriate, to sexualize, children, but also to sexualize that Native identity. And because, we're so fetishized, we're objectified, and we're dehumanized through these stereotypes. And that's what people don't understand. Even now, it's 2015, but we are still trying to be seen as human beings. But we have to contend with all these stereotypes. We have to contend with mascots. And we have to contend with the people. Like, there's so many groups out there that are trying to save that by trying to preserve mascots, trying to preserve these stereotypes, that they're preserving our culture as Native people. And that's
Yeah,
absolutely ridiculous.
slide 7, John. Yeah, there's 7. There we go. There's there's the whole mascot issue too, that and the psychological effects of this on kids. They grow up so confused. They're always the bad guys. Back when everything was cowboys and Indians, the Indians were always the bad guys. They were always shifty, and they were always doing something wrong. Now we have sports teams that have just the most horrible names and images that you can think of. And we've got fans that are running around dressing up like Indians and and carrying on drinking and falling over and you know, go back to your reservation. We're gonna womp you all the way back to the reservation. You're gonna have to drink fire water, all this other kind of um stuff that goes on when they talk about natives as mascots.
Hmm.
Absolutely. And the other impact that this has had, you know, whether it's the costumes, whether it's mascots, is that it's made some of the issues that we face within our community synonymous with our identity as Native people. You know, especially, you know, with Native Americans, we deal with high levels of alcoholism, drug abuse, suicide. But through these mascots that only perpetuate this negative image of who we are as people, that's how people think of all Native Americans. You know, anytime we address the mascot issue or stereotypes, you know, they always come back with this, you need to go back to the res, you know, you're just a drunk Indian, and just all these stereotypes that come up. And, you know, it's really harmful, especially for our children, because this is how they are viewed as people without anyone getting to know them as not just Native Americans, but as individuals. You know, nobody gives them the chance because or to show who they really are and what they can do. You know, these really do have a harmful impact on our children, and especially within schools, they create hostile learning environments. You know, here in Oklahoma, Capitol Hill recently changed their mascot from the Redskins, and the students had a protest, and it was very similar to some of the pictures that you saw during the 60s when schools were being desegregated. You had Native children walking in, and protesters were yelling at them as they were going into the school. And so this is what we're contending with in 1990, okay, in 2015.
You're too young to have senior moments. John, if we could go to slide 8. So yeah, in the stereotype issue too with cultural appropriation, what we find, I think, is that our political voices are marginalized as well. So you get the you don't look like an Indian, there aren't any Indians left. There's issues like the Black Hills, the return of the Black Hills. The Lakota for almost a century and a half now have said that the Black Hills are not for sale. Those are our sacred lands. Give them back. Uranium mining on Navajo land. Just this evening on the news there's a big brouhaha about a couple of suburbs in St. Louis that have been subjected to low-level radiation, and everybody's all up in arms about, oh, we need to hurry up and get this fixed. There's over 250,000 people on the Navajo Indian Reservation that have been subjected to low-level contamination since the 1930s. No one says anything about it. No one does anything about it. Why? Uh, Look at the stereotypes. Look at what people think we are. We're a joke. And
Absolutely.
if our legislators think we're a joke, that we can be run over and pushed on, then you get things like the Gold King mine spill, which was a horrible devastation for the Navajo farmers. You heard nothing about that. You heard nothing about the fact that they weren't bringing any water into the Navajo nation. They were bringing it everywhere else, but not to there. The people were drinking out of that river. And then, of course, Oak Flat, which Eniko's going to be talking about in a minute.
Yeah,
So,
and
Yeah.
I mean, it's really crazy because even with, you know, the gold mine spill, you know, you didn't hear that the water that they did send to the Navajo Nation was sent in barrels that transported tar sands. So they were getting contaminated water um, to water their crops with. And, you know, I mean, how horrifying would that be in 2015 when you experience a disaster and you have emergency help coming, but that water that they give you is contaminated? I mean, that's just beyond comprehensible. You know, I mean,
Yeah,
I cannot
yeah,
understand how that happens in 2015 that, you know, for any people that anyone would think that it's okay to give them contaminated water and then be like, oh, well, you know, it's okay, it's safe. But clearly it's not when you can see the oil streaks in this water.
For
yeah.
sure.
Are there any questions out there, Eniko? Anybody?
I saw one by Shameful63. Are there any groups or communities besides this one that are trying to bridge cultural divides and educate people on this, Johnny, that you know of?
Absolutely. There are so many groups right now doing such great work to address all the issues that we face, not just stereotypes. I sit on the board of Not Your Mascots, and this is what we do. We try to address and educate people on the harm that comes from the misappropriation of our identity, our imagery, and you know we try to do that in an educational way. But there are so many groups out there. You have the NCAI. You have groups like Nerds, which is a nonprofit that started by Dakota Brown, who was 16 when he conceived of this idea to tutor Native students. And you know, since he started this group, you know, the graduation rate of Native students in his school has gone up significantly. But
That's
we have
awesome.
so many groups out there who are working to address the miseducation that we've had growing up. You know, we have groups here in Oklahoma who are trying to um, discontinue the land run reenactments. And they actually put together a wonderful program that could be instituted into our schools called Oklahoma History Days, where you're not celebrating the land runs, but you're actually getting a more rounded look at what life was like for Native people, for the freedmen, for free black communities, and also for the pioneers coming in. And so you get a more rounded look about what that history was and how it differed from the perspectives of each community. But it was so amazing. You know, I got to go through their pilot program and see how it was going to work for this coming year. And, you know, I was just blown away. But, you know, I mean, there's work being done. Even in Washington, it is now mandatory for them to take Native American history. And they're using a program called Since in Time Memorial. And this is a curriculum that was put together by the various tribes in Washington. And, you know, it takes
Hmm.
students through what tribal sovereignty is, you know, our constitutions, you know, even who we are as Native people, our histories. But, I mean, there's so much work being done right now. It's just amazing right now.
That's awesome because I was just going to say there's really one narrative that is taught, or that at least I was taught, and I went to public school as well as religious schools, but the narrative about the Native Americans is pretty much the same in the textbook. So you don't hear about like all of the different details of each culture. And so you're right, Johnny, I think in saying that people just aren't educated on it. And I consider myself among those people too. I mean, I did not know that those costumes were offensive in my younger days. You know, I might have worn one. I don't feel like I was trying to offend anybody. At the same time, you know, there's like that fine line you said of appreciation versus appropriation, and if people are educated, maybe have more integration into the Native American culture. Like, for example, when I was growing up, I didn't have any Native American friends. I didn't know a lot of people other than white Christians, which is the way I was raised, which, you know, changes. And that cultural knowledge would have been helpful, you know, if they taught us in schools that, hey, this is appropriation, you shouldn't do this. Then maybe if we cared about that kind of thing, to appreciate each other's cultures more, then we could say we're not going to wear this stuff. And there's a fine line between freedom of expression too. I'm big on freedom of expression. If you're not harming somebody, I don't think it's like a terrible thing to do, but this is harming, and the ways that it's harming people, you guys just explained, a lot of people don't know that. So
Yeah, and
just
you know,
wanted to
and I
express that.
know, you know, a lot of people like when we see cultural appropriation, just because we're so easily triggered, you know, we've been so marginalized and oppressed for so long that, you know, sometimes we forget, we just react when we see cultural appropriation, and we don't take the time to really understand sometimes that, people don't really have this knowledge. People really don't know. And, I know that they're not doing this to be hurtful. Their intent is not to cause harm or to be racist. I know this. But just because a person is ignorant of the history behind these stereotypes and ignorant of the harm that comes from, like the mascots, it doesn't negate the impact that it has for Native people. And that's why we try to educate people on why it's wrong. I mean, literally right now, there are thousands upon thousands of articles that you can Google that talk about cultural appropriation, that talk about the harm that it has on Native people. So, we have the information these days. We have the means to educate ourselves on what is and isn't harmful.
Mm-hmm. Definitely, and what you've just told us is very educational too. So I appreciate you coming on to the program. That was excellent.
Yeah, thank you very much, Johnny. Appreciate you coming on, and maybe later in the football season we can sit down and have a good talk about a certain football team.
Absolutely. And for you listeners and watchers out there, if you want to see what Native fashion is, visit nativemax.com. The magazine that I work with, we are the first Native American fashion magazine. So if you want to see Native fashion, come to our website and check it out, and you can learn about the wonderful designers that we have and the work they're doing. You can also visit nativeappropriations.com for more information on what cultural appropriation is. And if you want to buy Native designs, Native jewelry, check out Beyond Buckskin. They do amazing work there.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Johnny. Plug all of your...
Right.
Sorry, go ahead, Pat.
I was just going to say all of those links will be on native-life.net after this broadcast is over. I'll throw them up there.
Awesome. Yeah, it looks like Johnny has a great source of information and lots of resources.
Okay. And
thank you for having me on.
You're welcome. Thank you for coming. Okay, Eniko, I believe that you have an Oak Flat update.
I do have an Oak Flat update. Well, it's basically one of the other interviews that I did. It's not necessarily something new. It's just another gentleman who is occupying there. I shouldn't say just because he's one of the main guys that kind of built his little habitat there. You'll be able to see that in the video. Behind him, there's like a little tent type of thing that is built, and they bring supplies, and there's different groups that bring water and donations, and Noel was kind enough to sit down for a pretty decently long interview with me, asking all about himself, also about how his life came to intersect with Oak Flat and why he is now occupying there. And so we have a segment here. I kind of left it kind of raw, less produced, because he does have a lot to say, and so I was really trying to not chop his interview up too much. And so the first half of his interview is in this segment, and then in the following segment, in episode 4, we'll do the second half, because there's a lot of information there. So, and one of the things I mentioned earlier, it kind of connects to what Johnny was saying, was whether or not a Native American tribe sees themselves as different from another one, or to see each other as Indigenous people as a union, and you do that in different contexts and different ways. So, John, if you want to play that segment.
Actually with Lakota Sioux blood, a descendant of Crazy Horse, but during a time that if you said you were Lakota Sioux and you were not on the reservation, they would hang you as one of the conspirators who murdered Custer. In 1954-55, then Eisenhower signed a bill that allowed our people to register, be off the reservation, and not get hung. And they didn't even tell me about my American Indian Lakota Sioux background until Eisenhower signed that bill, because they didn't want a young boy making a mistake and mentioning his background and getting us in trouble. My great-grandmother was about 6'1" or so, and she was one of the tall ones. I was tall, but my dad and mother aren't tall. but she was tall and thin, and she came over and pointed this long bony finger at me, and she said, "You're Lakota Sioux, boy. You're a direct descendant of Crazy Horse. You walk tall and proud and bring no shame on the people." Well, to me, I mean, it was almost like I was looking at a walking skeleton ghost, you know, and I'm like, "Yes, grandmother." But she made sure that I was trained. My great-grandfather did the same. My grandfather did the same, especially after we could be Lakota and not get hung. And I learned all of our ways from them and tracking and everything, which I always loved, and it came in very handy. My skills that I learned saved me and others in Vietnam, which is kind of wild because the American military got guerrilla warfare from our people. The code talkers saved the bacon and some of it in World War I, in World War II, and they were even used in Vietnam and Korea. So we've done so much, and yet this is going to cover the thanks we get for it, which is contrary to saying thank you. We get stabbed in the back instead. Then later in life, I went into the military intelligence. I actually started Army Security Agency, military intelligence. Basically, they always wanted the American Indians to say and stay separate. They want the American Indians to say, well, we are a sovereign nation, the Apache. We are a sovereign nation, the Sioux. Because they love stomping on a bunch of small, divided enemies. One of the things that they always feared most was something happening that would bring all of the American Indians together, and they would have a large, united opponent. And that scared the bejesus out of them, and rightly so. And actually, they even admitted if the tribes in America would have stayed united in the very beginning, we'd have an American Indian in the White House. So I was privileged to be raised with our ethics, our ways, and our knowledge, basically in survival, in the wilderness, in tracking, and in many other ways. And I believe this nation is going to need that again, especially if DC's left in charge, because they're destroying the nation. It's going to be back to survival if they keep going the way that they're going. I worked together with actually McCain's VA guy to expose the VA wrongs, but didn't know McCain was doing this other stuff behind my back. Trying to get this land, he was behind Rosemont in Tucson. He's been behind the stuff up at the Navajo reservation, and he's behind this one. Number one, they contribute heavily to his campaign. He gets a kickback of power and position. Number two, I would not be a bit surprised if we followed the money and found either payoffs or employments for relatives or friends and other favors done. So at the very least, he got a lot of power because he keeps getting elected. And worst case scenario, he's been crooked to the hilt, which lately he said that the Apache are lying, this is not holy ground. And I can prove beyond a shadow of a doubt, basically my sworn testimony, but I knew the grandson of Geronimo III, raised by his grandfather. And I did, what happened is I got involved, very involved in researching old trails, researching the great chiefs, Geronimo, Crazy Horse, great chiefs, etc., finding trails, finding dwellings, finding places they stayed that aren't even on the grid. And I gave tribes information on trails and places and paint mine and cliff dwellings and things that the tribes didn't have. And I loved the history, the archaeology, and everything. And matter of fact, my dad had an engineering degree. My brother has an engineering degree, and they also had archaeology and all of that. So I was always in that realm, but I heard that they were going to sign, that they'd been after this place. And when I heard the 10-year battle, I told McCain, I said, don't you touch American Indian land. I said, anything you do on American Indian land, I don't care if it's reservation now or if it used to be reservation, you honor the people, the original people. You go through the council and you go through the chairman. And if you're not going through the chairman and the council, if you don't have their permission, you don't do it. Because I told him, he knew, when his bid for the candidate for president, when that was dead, the whole nation had him dead. I told his guy, Tom McCanna, I've got 1,500 emails ready to send out. The National American Indian Veterans was my brainchild. I was the first historian for the approximate 600 tribes for national. And I said, I'll send it on a Friday. He will raise 3 points by the following Monday, 2 to 3 points, and he'll go on to be the candidate. They saw that happen. I told McCain that was American Indians and American Indian veterans working with other veterans that did that for him. So he knew we made him the presidential candidate. When his bid was dead, we made it a victory for him. And I said, don't you touch American Indian stuff. You need to work together with our people to help our people to restore the dignity, power, and pride of the people. It's another almost like a treaty or agreement, but the 13 I know of, they've broken every single one of them. Every time they tried to make it stand on its own. McCain, for 30 years, told people nobody should put a rider in the defense authorization bill because nobody dares vote against it. Now, actually, Obama could have said, I'm going to remand the defense bill, take this out, and then I'll sign it, otherwise I'll veto it, and in the meantime, I'm going to provide for emergency provisions for the national defense. He could have done that, but he didn't. Many of these groups, including Christian groups, have people doing things with good intentions, but what they're doing is horrific. As an example, trying to control and convert all American Indians. What the hell, we got to change them all. We got to take away their customs, take away their language, take away all this. The Christians who do that are just as wrong as any Islamic who allowed this to happen. Both of those are wrong.
Extremism in general is wrong.
Exactly. If people will get into moderation, study for themselves, they will see the extreme value here. Eisenhower investigated this place in 1954 and found the archaeological value, the historic value, and the sacred to the Apache value. Therefore, he declared that the land had to be removed from mining. It was put under treaty, and this was actually given back to the San Carlos as reservation.
It was Noel Benoist, one of the occupiers, giving us a lot of information about his role, and also about McCain. He's our Arizona senator who is not very popular among Native Americans and nature lovers and environmentalists. He, as you heard Noel say, is behind a lot of these things. And I think, Pat, you showed a clip before about the Navajo running him off their property. I don't know if we have that video for this episode. That maybe that next episode we'll play that if we can get permission for it. I would love to show that on our show, because that's another thing that John McCain is so involved in, and he's behind the Oak Flat thing too. What a hypocrite, saying all these years, don't put anything in the national defense bill because people won't dare to not vote for it. Well, he turns around and does exactly what he opposes and puts it in there, knowing that people can't not vote for passing this bill. And so here we go again, trying to repeal instead of, after the fact, trying to repeal instead of discussing it beforehand. And again, the Native Americans take the brunt of it. So it sucks. Pat?
Yeah, I'll get with the group that produced that video of the full one of John McCain and everything that went down when they were talking to the police that showed up and so on.
Yeah, that was
the
amazing
drum group
footage.
and yeah, that was a nicely done clip, and I'll have to talk to the people who put it out to see if we can use it next week. Although next week is kind of full.
That's true too. Well, maybe we could put the link to it underneath our video here, just so you have a reference.
Or I can put it on.
John McCain has his hands in everything.
Yeah, he sure does. Quite in the pockets of the mining companies for sure.
Yeah, and I read that he got to go on a tour of this Resolution mine, and nobody else apparently gets to go in there, including inspectors, but John McCain gets to go and see what's up there.
Okay. That's
right?
Interesting. Does anybody have any questions about this? About what's going on at Oak Flat?
There's been all sorts of stuff in the YouTube chat. Very active. They really like that piece, Eniko.
Thank you. And next week he'll be talking a little further about it, about his involvement in it.
Okay, yeah, and if you could go to the webpage, John, on Oak Flat, it's in the description under Take Action. We have put together a web page so folks can contact the people who are on the committee. The bill has been introduced in the House, and it's got 34 co-signers, or co-sponsors. So there's 34 people in the House that have co-sponsored this bill.
Yep, and actually, Pat, just yesterday it gained another co-sponsor. I'm tracking this bill, and Representative Matthew Cartwright from Pennsylvania joined as a co-sponsor to the bill. So.
Okay, and there's 13 people who hold the fate of this bill in their hands. It has to go through this committee. And so what we're asking people to do is to contact their Facebook page, tell them to support this bill, tell them that we would like to see it come out of committee and onto the floor of the House to be voted on. It would be awesome if they could bring it out and vote on it in December. That would be kind of a nice circle, because it was in December, December 9th, that John McCain snuck the rider into the military appropriation bill. It would be nice if we had the Save Oak Flat onto the House floor and voted on and passed by Christmas time.
Yeah, that would be nice, because that, and Celeste Holmes asked how long the occupiers have been there. I believe it's going to be a year in December after the rider was put into the bill. I believe they started right after that. And in August, there were still tents there.
Okay, well, we have some, unless there's any other questions or something somebody wants to talk about.
Do you want me to read off the names of the Republicans who you guys need to contact?
Yeah, because it's mostly Republicans.
Yeah, well, because the Democrats are probably going to be voting yes on this, so it's really the Republicans we need to push, and that is Don Young of Alaska, Paul Gosar of our 4th District here in Arizona, Jeff Denham, California's 10th District, Amada Coleman Radewagen, Vice Chairman, American Samoa at Large. Then there is Rob Bishop, Utah's 1st District, Paul Cook, California's 8th District, Doug LaMalfa, California's 1st District, Den Benishek, Michigan's 1st District. If you could please call these people, like Pat said, their numbers are right there on our page, and pressure them to save Oak Flat and support this bill.
And the link to that is under Take Action in the description of this broadcast. So all you have to do is click on the link, and then there's links there for you to click on to go to the Facebook pages. So it's just very, very simple to be able to take action on this issue. Yep. And speaking of take action, I'll run down here and give one last plug for the support Native artists. Please support Native artists. These folks generally, you know, there's only a few things that are open to Natives to do. It is a law that you can't misrepresent yourself as a Native and say that you're producing Native American stuff. So you need to make sure that you know that you're buying from Native Americans. It's fairly easy to research. If you have any questions, you can contact me on our website, native-life.net, and I'll be glad to recommend various Native artists and Native sites that you can go look at for the upcoming Christmas holidays. And awesome. Next week, I'll just go into that a little bit. Next week is all about food. Food sovereignty. There's nothing that Natives like better than to talk about food. And The Fond du Lac tribe up in Minnesota and Wisconsin is working on reintroducing wild rice. It's a very fascinating process. And then I believe, Eniko, we have a special guest.
Yep, Maria Myers is going to be with us talking about food sovereignty and her goal of reaching GMO-free people.
All right. Well, we thank everybody for showing up. We appreciate everyone that stops by to look at this, whether it's while it's live or if we're already been recorded and you just couldn't get to the live broadcast. And we'll see you next week.
And thank you very much, Pat. And on Friday, October the 23rd, we're going to be rocking the burn. Progressive Greens, Rich Green is going to be our host for that. That's at 7 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time. I'm sorry, going live at 7:30 Eastern Time. Then on Saturday, October 24th, is the Jefferson Jackson Dinner, and that is going to be going live also at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. So, and host is going to be Shameful, Kelly, Shameful63. So looking forward to both of those shows. I'll be co-hosting on Friday. And anything else to add, Pat?
No, the
National
last...
Town Hall.
Yeah.
Oskaloosa, yeah.
It's the last one on October 28th, guys, the National Student Town Hall, where Bernie will be speaking.
Yes.
Third event.
And I believe he'll be at George Mason University in Virginia, Northern Virginia. So for folks in the D.C. area, if you want, now there are only going to be a limited number of tickets, and I would contact the school to find out how they're distributing those tickets, because there may not be enough to go around just from the kids at the school.
Cool. Thank you very much. And we'll go out with actually a creation by Pat, right? You said this is your first creation?
Yeah, it's my very first music video. The music is by Nakota Lodge, and it's called Earth. And the imagery behind is some royalty-free footage from Vimeo. All the credits to the various artists and the people who provided the images are in the credits that'll roll at the end of the song. And we'll see you guys next week.
Thank you. Bye.
Never go Johnny, walk a cherry over one, huge